Welcome to the Arithmetic Zone, and today we're going to look at JSON and APIs. So right now I'm on this website. It's essentially a random user generator, and I'm going to provide the link to this in the description, so don't worry. But essentially this website, if you use the link that they provide, it gives you the data of random users, the quantity at which you choose. Now don't worry, these users are all fake. Like, this guy is probably not real. I say probably because I hope so. Anyway, when you look at all this, if you look at the results, whenever you enter the link, you're going to be greeted with a page with data formatted in this way, and this is called JSON, JavaScript Object Notation. And as the name implies, it's essentially data formatted in the way of JavaScript objects, and you can recognize all the different string properties and their values. So if you watch the basic JavaScript part 6 video, we could use all this information in our code. But how can we even, get all this information into our files anyway? Well, we're going to click on the documentation page, and here it tells us how to use all this data. And this is part of the API, the application program interface, which is essentially a device that allows two programs to communicate with each other. Using this API, we can have our code communicate with all this separate information so that we can use it. On the documentation page, what I'm interested in is this part where it gives us a URL to request multiple users. So I can change this 5,000 to a different number, say like 20, and if I enter this URL, I can get the JSON data of 20 random users. So that's what I'm going to do right now. I'm going to copy this, and I'm going to paste it right here. Again, I'm going to change it to 20 for our purposes. I don't want to press enter just yet, because before we actually look at all this data, I want to actually download in a Chrome extension that allows us to view this JSON in a much nicer format. So I'm going to look up JSON parser Chrome extension, and this should be the first result, JSON formatter. And we're going to add this to Chrome. So add the extension. Don't worry, it's perfectly safe. So now we have it in Chrome. So now if I were to access this link, I get it in this really nice format that you can clearly see is based on JavaScript. You can see the strings in green, all the numbers in blue. And if I want to view the original format, I can just click on raw, and this is what it would have looked like if I were to just enter the link without downloading the extension. And this would be much harder to put in our code. So we're going to go back to parsed. We're going to control A everything, and then in Visual Studio Code, I'm going to put it all in action. So as you can see, I'm back in my CS folder. I made a separate JSON folder for today's video. I have an HTML page, a script.js page, and a data.js page. So we have two JavaScript files instead of one this time. And we're going to pull out all of our data in the data.js file. So we're going to say let data equal, and then we're going to go back into this page where we got all the random data of 20 users. We're going to control A to select everything, then copy. Then we're going to paste it all into data. So right there. And it should work without any errors. Just double check. So save. And now we have all of the data of 20 random users of fake people saved into a JavaScript file in object notation in JSON, and we can use all this information in our code to display it on a web page. That is our plan. So back in our HTML page, we're going to say exclamation mark, tab, and then let's say user display, and then we gotta link the HTML in the JavaScript files. So script source, and then data.js, and then defer, So we link the HTML and the data file together. And we also want to link the script.js file. So underneath script source equals script.js defer. So if you're wondering why I have two JavaScript files, data.js holds all the JSON data, while script.js is where I'm going to use that data and put it on the web page. So let's go live. To start off, we're going to see nothing obviously because we didn't put in anything. So let's make a div, give it an ID of main, and then in our script.js file we're going to get this main div using DOM. So get document.get element by ID and then main. So now what we're gonna do, if you look in our data.js file, we can see all these individual people have in their properties. Even in Visual Studio Code, it can be a little difficult to see what information we exactly want. So let's go back into our formatted JSON in the web page, and I should probably mention that you really should not refresh this page or like even like access this link multiple times, because if you do, then what happens is that your IP will literally get blocked from accessing this information for a certain length of time. So you don't want to spam calls to this URL or like any variation of the URL. So just be mindful of that. But when we look at it from here, we can see that we have one object with one property, results, and then info. We don't need info, so we're gonna have to reference results, and then results is a list of other objects, and we definitely want the name. We don't really want location. If we do, maybe just the country or state. And then we do want date of birth, maybe phone, ID. I think all of that is definitely really important. But you can see how this whole data is just formatted using nested objects and nested loops. So we're gonna have to be careful on how we reference our data here. So back in our script.js file, if we want to get all this data, which there's 20, so I is less than 20, or if you want to reference the specific length, the length of the results property, as you can see right here, results has 20 items and which is 20 users. So if you want to reference the length specifically, we would say I is less than data, which we referenced in data.js, dot, and then double check results, and then results is a list. So we say results.length, and this format, this should work for basically any call to this API with any number. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna make a whole bunch of separate divs, and we're gonna append it to the main div for every iteration. So again, we're gonna look at what information we want. So we definitely want the name. We'll take the first and last name. So we'll just say let name div equal document.create element, and then this should be h1. And then we're going to set name div.inner HTML equal data.results, which we always have to reference. And then after that, if you look back, in the results is a list, so results I for the current user. So once we specify the item, we gotta again specify the property. So dot name and then dot first for the first name, and then we want the last name too. So we're going to copy and paste this and then just change the last one to first to last. So just to make sure that this works, I'm going to write main div.append name div at the end, and I'm gonna check our web page. So user display, and look at that, it puts in all the names in the order of that the JSON file gave us. So we know that that works. So we can move on. What else do we want to include? Well, I noticed in the API we were given pictures, and then if I were to visit these links, I can get pictures of the random users. So let's take the medium version. So we're going to reference this in a similar vein as we did with name div, but first we got to make a new div. So let image div equals document.create element, and then img. And I just realized I probably shouldn't call these divs because well, these aren't actually, you know, div elements. So I'll call them tags instead of divs. So name tag, and then this one should also be name tag. So we made a new image element. Now we gotta set the source. Now I said before that the source doesn't have to come from your from a file within the program. It can actually come from a link, and in this case we're gonna use the link. We're not gonna, you know, download every single image. That's just gonna take too long. So, and luckily the link is provided to us with the API. So within the picture and then the large, medium, and thumbnail properties, we're going to reference medium. So we're going to say, and I'm just going to copy and paste this, data.results I, and then instead of .name, we want to use .picture, and then .medium. And then again, we're going to append image tag just to see if it works. And it works. Pretty small, but gets the job done. So what other properties can we include? Looking at location, we're given, you know, the country and the state, and I think that would definitely be interesting to provide. So let's go with that. So again, we're gonna make a new element. So let location tag equal document.create element, and let's make this just a regular p element. So location tag equals data, or no, .inner HTML, because this is a text tag, data.results I, and then double check the properties. Location, then we want state and country. So .location, and then usually you say the state first, followed by a comma, and then the country name. So .country right here, and then let's append the location tag at the end, and then also let's say from, like, colon, just so it's more clear what that information represents on our web page. And we have we now have locations for each user. I think that the last property that I'll derive is going to be the email, and the email doesn't have any other objects within it, just has one string, so that makes it really simple for us. So let mail div, or I'm sorry, mail tag document.create element. I'm gonna do p again, and then mail tag .inner HTML equals email address, and then data.results I, and then was it .email? yes. And again, no subproperties, so that's all I have to put. And then let's save. Oh, I forgot to include it. I forgot to append it into the main div. That is definitely a common mistake, and do not forget to append any newly created elements into an already, created element in the HTML page, or else they will not display at all. So now we have the email address displayed. Finally, I think I'm gonna add the user number, which I'm not gonna use from the data. I'm just gonna use it. I'm just gonna create that variable myself. So let id num equal 0. So we're gonna set it to a number, and then we're gonna say let id tag equal document create element. I'm actually gonna make it in h3, and then id tag dot inner html equals, and then we're gonna say data. No, we're just gonna set it to I, which I represents the count, but it starts from 0 and then ends at before the length. So it's gonna go from 0 to 19. I want it to go from 1 to 20, so I can just say I plus 1. And I now realize that I don't actually need this variable, so scratch that. And then looking at our web page, I think it'd make more sense to include the ID near the beginning, so I'm going to put it before the image tag. So ID tag right here. And the order in which you append from left to right is the order that they get added into the HTML file. So now I see their user numbers. To make it more clear, I can write in user and then number, like that. So let's see. But it says 0, 1, 1, 1, 2, 1, 31, 41. What's happening here? When I append a string and then numbers like this, what happens is that it takes the string, then it appends the string and the numbers. So let's say I is 2, becomes user number 2, and then because it treats this whole thing as a string, it's going to append this 1 as a string. So it's going to say user number 21. To fix this, you can write in parentheses between the I and the 1, so that now order of operations takes place. It combines these two numbers first before combining it with the string. If we look back, it now says the proper number is from 1 all the way to 20. So we successfully made this random user generator, but is it truly random? When I refresh this page, it's the same users every single time. I want this to be random every single time. How can I do that? We're going to take our API understanding to the next level. Back in this web page where I got the random users, here, if I were to refresh, then I would get a different list of 20 users. So note that the first user, they have an Arabic name. If I were to refresh, now we have a completely different user, one that's likely not even in this list of people that I have right here, because there's like over 5,000 users in this website. It's pretty crazy. If I refresh again, get a different user again, and I'm getting different users each time. So I want the same thing to happen with my web page. And how can I do that? Well, luckily JavaScript has a built-in function to directly call the API within the code instead of having to rely on this data.js file, which remains static forever. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to select all of this, and then we're going to comment it all out. So control/. We're going to comment it all out because we don't want to use it anymore. And now what we're going to do is we want to directly call the API and then use the data we get each time. So we're going to use a command called fetch. So what are we going to get? What are we going to fetch? We're going to fetch this JSON that we get from putting in this URL. Every time I enter this URL, I keep getting different results each time. So we're going to put fetch and then the URL, put it in string. So make sure there's quotation marks around it. Then we're going to quite literally say dot then, and then we're going to write in function, and then inside the parameter you can say response, and then we're going to press tab here just so that it's easier to see. Then we're going to put in the squiggly brackets, and then this parentheses should not be here. It should actually be after the squiggly brackets right there. So inside of here we're going to say return response.json. So what does this whole code segment do? When we say fetch, we're telling JavaScript to get the JSON data from this link, and then we're going to return it in the JSON format using function response and then .then. But we don't want to just return it, we want to use it, so we're going to say .then, and then again function data, and then squiggly brackets in between those yellow parentheses right there. Right here, this is where we're going to use our data. So when we say .then function data, we're telling JavaScript to save the JSON response into the data variable that we essentially just created. And these commands I'm using right here are very reminiscent of a new kind of JavaScript that I haven't covered yet, that I do plan on covering in the future, and it will probably be my final basic JavaScript video, so stay tuned for that. Now we're gonna move everything, like all this code, inside of this code segment right here. So let me just highlight all this and then press tab so that it's easier parsed. So now we're using, all this data from this random fetch call right here, and everything is saved right now. So if I'm going to go to my web page, suddenly we have a different user at the beginning, and we have completely different users. If I refresh, different users, different users, different users. So that's the power of the API call. I can get truly random users because I'm calling this and retrieving this data each time I load the web page, instead of calling it once and then saving all of its initial data. So that's the basics of JSON and API collection. As I said before, I am going to make another basic JavaScript video where I cover the new syntax of JavaScript that I briefly mentioned here. And after that, we're going to finally conclude the Introduction to Web Design series by making a fully fledged website that uses most, if not everything we learned in this series. So I'll see you guys then, and have a nice day. What I'm interested in is right here, requesting multiple users. Bro, what? Bro, what is this? What? What the hell?